On December 7, 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, virtually obliterating our entire Pacific Fleet, unexpectedly thrusting America into World War II.
Just 2 years and 6 months after Pearl Harbor, 150,000 Allied troops landed in Normandy. Within 2 months, over 2 million Allied forces were fighting in France.
Any American who visits Pearl Harbor or Normandy is reminded of the courageous efforts that Americans put into winning World War II. It was the greatest threat America had ever faced. Yet we won World War II in just 3 years and 8 months by embracing an all-out, get-the-job-done approach. I'm Newt Gingrich.
And I'm Callista Gingrich. America is again faced with a crisis, this time over rising energy costs and 30 years of destructive governmental policy. America is under assault from key oil-producing states, some of which are radical regimes whose energy prices and policies are systematically undermining our economy, our national security, and the American way of life.
The United States is being held hostage by the likes of Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Venezuela. We pay a hefty ransom to foreign powers every day, to the tune of $2 billion every 24 hours.
We are observing right now the largest wealth transfer in the history of the United States, where the American people, every time they go to the pump, every time they pay their electric bill, we're seeing a wealth transfer to countries that don't like us very much.
This year, given our requirements for imported crude oil and natural gas, we'll send some $700 billion of American money overseas.
We send about $50 million a day to Russia, who uses that money to do other things because we buy oil in the quantities we do and we don't develop our own resources. About $190 million a day to Saudi Arabia and roughly $150 million a day to Hugo Chavez in Venezuela. All of those places are doing bad things with that money.
We are the world's hugest oil importer. A fair share of that, hundreds of billions, goes to OPEC. Some of the countries of OPEC are able, through contributions to individuals, to terrorist groups, to all sorts of direct and indirect way, to fund terrorism.
Some petroleum exporting countries are manipulating America. They open their oil and gas supplies when they need to quiet Congress.
Right now, they don't have to compete against anything. They hold their OPEC meetings, and they just have to decide strategically how far they're willing to push the price. They can raise it as high as they want, okay? They've raised the price from $11 a barrel in 1999 to over $100 a barrel today. Hugo Chavez is already pushing to raise it to $200 next year. And they can do that if there's no competition. We create competition, we break their power to raise prices at will.
If we hope to solve our energy crisis, we must embrace the can-do spirit of our parents and grandparents in World War II. We must adopt the same spirit that mobilized our great nation and embark on an energy strategy. A strategy to make our country stronger, more prosperous, and safer than ever.
But the overwhelming need for a new and bold 21st century American energy program is about more than just the price of filling our gas tanks. It's also about a patriotic drive and determination to protect America by cutting off the flow of our dollars to the foreign dictators who control so much of the world's oil supply.
Since about 2/3 of the world's proven reserves of conventional petroleum are in the Middle East, something approaching 2/3 of the world's petroleum infrastructure is there, and it is a place of great chaos. Iran is working very hard on having a nuclear weapon. The Saudis, the Egyptians, a number of other Sunni states have said, well, if Shiite Iran is going to have a nuclear weapon, we also are going to need a nuclear electricity. Right, yeah, exactly. Of course, that's what they want. I'm afraid they also want to have nuclear weapons programs. And what that means is that we are helping fund through oil a nuclear arms race between Sunni and Shia in the Middle East. The world as a whole faces real risk of terrorist attacks there, driving oil up to over $200 a barrel.
The United States is under attack by the oil cartel, not just because the primary oil states like Saudi Arabia and Iran are using their money to promote terrorism, but they are directly taxing us into a depression right now. This year, the United States is going to pay $1 trillion for oil, 60% of it, to foreign countries, mostly tyrannies. $1 trillion, that's up from $80 billion in 1999. $1 trillion is 40% of what Americans pay the IRS. So this is like a 40% tax increase, but instead of the money going to Uncle Sam, it's going to Uncle Saud.
So how is it that we now find ourselves in the middle of an energy crisis when our country is so rich in energy resources? How did we get where we are today? Why aren't we drilling for more oil in America, especially when we have so much oil right here at home?
There was an oil spill some 30, 40 years ago off the coast of California. And as a result of this ban on drilling in the Outer Continental Shelf came into being. But that's where the oil and the natural gas are.
As a result of a congressional ban, it's illegal today to drill in the vast majority of federal waters off of our coastlines. Known as the Outer Continental Shelf, or the OCS, an area stretching more than 200 nautical miles around the shores of the United States.
We've taken $60 trillion worth of resources and put a lock on them. The rest of the world is exploiting their natural resources to the benefit of their country. In some cases, by the way, not to the benefit of the United States.
These people are enemies not only of America, but of the very principle of freedom that America stands for. Any kind of freedom, political freedom, intellectual freedom, scientific freedom, artistic freedom, freedom of personal life. Okay? Every single thing we stand for, they oppose. And we are transferring power to them. And at the fastest rate of transfer of power in human history. $1.5 trillion a year going to OPEC this year. This is an enormous sum of money, and it is transferring control of the world to people who believe in freedom, to people who don't.
Currently, the United States has granted a total of 8,000 offshore drilling leases, producing 15% of our natural gas supply and 27% of our oil supply. Opening the other 85% of the Outer Continental Shelf could produce a stable, reliable, and affordable supply of domestic oil and natural gas for decades.
We have some very old statistics from the Minerals Management Service, and they're very conservative statistics. They say that we have 88 billion barrels of oil in the Outer Continental Shelf. That's a very low figure. We have far more than that.
In July of 2008, President Bush lifted the executive ban on offshore oil drilling and challenged Congress to follow suit.
Democratic leaders can show that they have finally heard the frustrations of the American people by matching the action I've taken today, repealing the congressional ban, and passing legislation to facilitate responsible offshore exploration. The failure to act is unacceptable. It's unacceptable to me, and it's unacceptable to the American people.
Part of the reason people are paying $4 a gallon for gasoline at home is because we are not using our own natural resources, including drilling on the Outer Continental Shelf.
With today's advances in technology and environmental regulations, exploration can be conducted along the Outer Continental Shelf in ways that keep the drilling out of sight and protect the environment.
The kind of technology that's in the offshore of the United States, especially in the deeper waters now, is mind-blowing. Some of these rigs are $3 billion before they pump a barrel of oil.
For example, computer controls, 3D seismic, which allows us to shoot underground pictures, basically from different angles, and thump the ground, thump the ocean, and cause sonic waves to bounce around. We capture those from different angles, positions, and from that are able to tell what's under the sea and where it is and how much, and it allows us to go down and effectively get it out.
Some critics worry our offshore platforms will be an environmental risk because of hurricanes, which could lead to large oil spills.
We can look back over the last several hurricanes that have come through the United States. Hurricane Katrina, for an example, we did not have a major oil spill with the hurricane because technology has changed. We have new safety regulations.
We have 150 years of experience almost of how to do it with very, very safe techniques. So we know how to handle things, and we haven't had a major oil leak. offshore since the one in 1969, which so scared us into our moratorium.
Some Democratic Party leaders completely misunderstand the process of oil discovery. They argue that no new lease should be granted until every existing leased acre has been developed.
Just because you pay an expensive price for a bid on a lease doesn't guarantee that there's any oil and gas there. You need about 60 leases in order to get the one that you want. So it's a very, very risky business.
Here's what we know for sure. America has over 15 billion barrels of oil and over 60 trillion cubic feet of gas offshore. Add to that the staggering estimates of our undiscovered offshore resources, 86 billion barrels of oil and 420 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. With such resources, America should be an undisputed energy giant.
We have enough offshore oil to cover all of our needs for over a decade. This won't eliminate our dependence on foreign oil, but it will dramatically reduce our vulnerability and lower prices.
It is important for America to develop American energy and to stop our dependence on foreign countries.
Why don't we put American jobs to work? Why don't we keep those dollars here at home and increase our energy security by opening up certain of those areas?
What's happened is there's been an amazing shift in public opinion. And what's so interesting about it is that that shift in public opinion occurred at a price point. It didn't occur at $3 a gallon or $3.50. All of a sudden at $4, it tipped everything.
Congress is the reason why we have this problem. It's a man-made problem, a government-made problem, if you will.
Lifting the ban will help lower gas prices immediately and produce thousands of American jobs. Offshore waters are not the only area where Congress has banned drilling. Ever since the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, or ANWR, was created in 1980, the federal government has deferred a decision on whether to allow oil drilling there.
And the 1002 area is neither a wilderness nor refuge. It's designated as an area set aside for the study of exploration of oil and gas. So it's a little bit of a conundrum. Here you've got an area that's set aside for oil and gas exploration. That's not a refuge, that's not wilderness, yet it lies within the borders of a national wildlife refuge.
ANWR is actually over 19 million acres. That's an enormous area. But President Jimmy Carter actually set aside 2,000 acres out of over 19 million. If you want an analogy, it would be the size of a postage stamp on a football field. That's the size that we're looking at drilling on.
The northern part of the refuge is called the coastal plain, a flat, treeless area.
What people see ANWR as in their mind, running water and big trees, and it's a beautiful wilderness area. Well, I can tell you, I've been there, and it's everything but that. It's a flat, barren slope.
Well, the reason you want to drill in ANWR is because that's where the oil is. If you could drill in places where it was comfortable, that would be nice, but you drill where the oil is. ANWR is where the oil is.
Even though drilling in ANWR would create thousands of American jobs, lower gas prices, and reduce our dependence on foreign oil, some environmentalists don't want a single inch of ANWR used for development.
The ANWR issue is enough to make you crazy because the arguments against it are so pathetically weak. It's all religion. The fact is that we have extremely high technology where we know how to drill sideways, which means you only have to have a very small area on the surface impacted in order to reach huge areas of oil underground. That means that we could be producing 1 million to 1.5 million barrels a day, which would be replacing about 10 or 15% of our non-North American imports, which would make a huge impact on us.
Well, at his press conference this week, President Bush blasted Congress for not allowing oil exploration in the Alaskan Wildlife Reserve. Democrats said it wouldn't do any good because it wouldn't produce oil for 10 years. You know, the same thing they said 10 years ago.
Drilling in ANWR means the United States would spend over $1 trillion here at home for domestic oil, rather than sending that money to foreign countries. Drilling in ANWR would also provide new revenue for the government without raising taxes.
Royalties and revenue for the federal government and taxes from development of the 1002 area of ANWR would be between $105 to $296 billion. So hydrogen power, wind power, solar power will all be funded by the development of oil and gas.